She's going to take over from here. But here you go.
Thank you. Sure.
Very much.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. So our next panel is financing a green just transition, which we're holding in partnership with the European Investment Bank. So I want to welcome Stephen O'Driscoll, who is the head of Environment, Climate, and Social Policy for EIB. Thank you, Stephen, for being here with us today.
Pleasure.
So ensuring a just transition for all is one of the pillars of the EIB's Climate Bank roadmap. Can you tell us, what does a just transition mean to EIB, specifically in terms of the bank's focus on clean energy transition?
I think a just transition for the bank means leaving no people and no place behind. I mean, we've very much taken a steer from what was in the Paris Agreement, which talked about creating decent and quality jobs and decent work. And we've very much taken that on board. Inside the Union, we are very much part of the EU's Just Transition mechanism. And for EIB, that's particularly relevant with respect to the third pillar of that, which is the public sector loan facility, where EIB loans are combined with EC grants, and we address just transition projects in areas that are most affected through withdrawing from coal and so on. Outside the EU, we took a slightly different slant, where we've looked at the climate social nexus a bit more broadly, because, you know, from our point of view, climate change is effectively a stress magnifier of all sorts of social issues, forced displacement, gender-based violence, vulnerable groups, and so on. So we think that there's more of a social dimension there. So if we can support projects that both address climate change and the implications of climate change and some of those social issues, then that's the way we like to look at that. We're also very interested in just resilience as a concept, because it's not actually just people that are affected by the implementation of policies associated with mitigation. It's also the case with adaptation, and different parts of society are affected differently by that as well. So just energy transition partnerships, that's perhaps the link. And you might be aware that last year in Glasgow, we pledged $1 billion towards the JETP in South Africa. And there's now discussions with very many different actors about rolling that potential model out across other countries as well. So we've actually just had a mission in South Africa this week. I think they might still be there, talking to the different actors down there to see how we can best bring in not only the energy transition side of it, but also the social side of it as well.
So on that note, can you talk a bit about, you mentioned South Africa, are there any other kind of projects that come to mind in terms of specifics that is going on as part of this just transition that EIB is helping to fund?
We're actually coming out with a outside EU just transition approach. May not be fully fledged out for COP, but we'll do it soon thereafter. But just thinking about back in Europe, actually, we've been working on just transition projects for a long time. I'm thinking in particular of Katowice in Poland, which was essentially a coal mining town in the past, and I think we're up to about 200 odd million in loans in terms of helping them transition away from coal mining into more sustainable economic activity. And on the social side, we've been helping them to make sure that the kind of urban centre of Katowice is a much better place to be, and people are more kind of positive about the future and so on. So that's one of the project examples that we have.
What does EIB see as key to boosting energy transition and climate adaptation, including important tech and innovation accelerations?
On the energy transition side first, which has obviously been the subject of much discussion, our president has been pressed repeatedly on that this week. We think that we're at an inflection point, after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We can either go one way and go back to investing in fossil fuel infrastructure and start to slide back to where we were, or we can go the other way. Really seize this opportunity, take this moment in time to accelerate away from it and very much more towards the green transition. We're very much of that second view as the EIB. We're a long-term financier. We have to generate money on the capital markets. We have a funding program of about 60 to 100 billion a year. So we have, we issue bonds, we issue green bonds. So what are our bondholders going to say if we suddenly turn back to fossil fuel? And also our energy lending policy of 2019 as well really kind of put the marker in the sand for us. So that's, with respect to the acceleration, we very much see that there's kind of three components to that. The first is doing much more renewables, many more renewables. The second is on the demand side, bringing down, improving energy efficiency. And then also green innovation in clean technology as well. And in these three areas, we currently invest about 12.5 billion a year at the moment. And we can do more, and that's what we'd like to do to try and accelerate, as I say, away from where we are.
So on the all-important subject of COP, at COP26, EIB launched its first dedicated adaptation plan to support projects around the world. What are the bank's priorities in the lead up to COP27? What are some of your hopes? And looking back, what progress has been made since COP26?
With respect to adaptation, we want to kind of report on the progress that we've made. We launched the plan last year. We've been trying to maintain the momentum. For us, adaptation was really kind of built around the EU adaptation strategy. So it's about faster, more systemic and smarter adaptation. So faster is about effectively scaling up quicker. And for that, we've actually tripled our commitment to adaptation finance. Smarter is effectively about closing the data gap. So we've actually struck up a very powerful relationship with the European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasting. So we're hoping to provide high-resolution climate data to our borrowers. And systemic is really about doing it beyond the single project. So we're starting to engage now with member states and countries outside the Union to look at their national adaptation plans. And hopefully we can bring a substantial amount of finance to help that along.
So now EIB also chairs the COP MDB group. It's a lot of acronyms all in one tiny sentence.
Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of the latest discussions, ways in which you're working together with other GFIs, and what lessons learned that can be applied for the wider development community?
In the MDB community, we talk regularly. I'm climate head for the EIB, and I mean, the latest discussions are essentially about the food and energy crisis and how the MDB community can support coming out of that. But also alongside that, the main topic of discussion is obviously climate and environment. And we're doing a lot this year. We hope to report on some of this at COP27. For example, we're looking at talking about the progress that we've made in the various Paris alignment methodologies, the different product types that we have, sector-based lending and so on, intermediated lending. We're going to update on where we are on the adaptation finance tracking methodology. And we've also spent quite some time and energy this year trying to build a concept around long-term strategy support facilities. So this is where the MDB collective would go in and sit alongside governments and help them really put some meat on the flesh of the bones of their long-term strategies, because actually only 41 countries, I think, have actually produced a long-term strategy, and this was actually a requirement of the Paris Agreement. So it's slightly concerning that that's not happened. So we want to try and bring our technical advisory support to bear there, and this is where donors will hopefully provide funds to a trust fund manager, and then the MDBs would actually do that work alongside the governments of the individual countries. Beyond that, we've had some very interesting discussions this year on nature and the environment. We're the EU Climate Bank, but that effectively means the EU Climate and Environment Bank. And we've talked about what is a nature positive investment, how can we better appreciate the value of nature, especially in the economic analysis work that we do for each of our projects. And so there's a lot of discussion going on. The DFIs, we have the Financing Commons Summit coming up in a couple of weeks' time. And this is where we really try and get together with the public development banks and try and work better together and understand where the synergies are, look for how we can better tap the private market for private sector finance and so on. And then the lessons learned, really about partnerships. We work better as a collective, in my view, than apart. But we ought not to step on each other's toes. Working together, working in harmony, get a better result.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate the insights on what the European Investment Bank is doing. So really, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.